extra talk.
Sorry, waiting for his wife.
Hey, Cooley, can you check the reg desk real quick, see if Kat's coming? Thank you.
Any check. Check. Check, check. Ah, there we go. Okay, now I'm on.
Hooray!
Anyone come out to Derby last night? All right. You guys have fun? Good to hear. That's this guy's house.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, we're waiting for Kyle's wife to come in from registration, so just one more minute, please.
A few stragglers coming in anyway, so it's all good.
Give us some facts and figures while we wait for the final, count for needs and guests. Things and so forth.
DerbyCon?
95 pounds of brisket. No, 105 pounds of brisket. About 105 of pork. We did 40 pounds of ribs, and we did about 15 of rib tips. There's still some other meat. There's still some raw meat left.
There's 40 pounds of chicken still. Yeah.
Yeah.
RSVP projections were a little short this year. Got about 25, 30. Sorry, I couldn't make it. So, yeah.
Yeah. We need to get a bus for next year. Just goes back and forth between the hotel and Kyle's house.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, the ribs.
Oh, they were pork ribs.
Yeah.
They were baby backs.
Yeah. But they turned out great.
Yeah, they did. Well, I've never done mesquite and cherry before, so that was a brand new one for me.
Yeah, cherry's not bad.
I've done cherry, just never done it with mesquite. Usually I use hickory for
on top of it.
Yeah, I've usually used hickory for it, so
Yeah.
it gave it a nice flavor.
I don't usually layer a whole lot. I usually just go single and then work with the spices.
Here they all are.
Hooray!
All right.
Okay.
All right. How's everyone doing today? Last talk of the evening, then you can all go get dinner if you haven't eaten already. All right. Welcome to HackerQue. Smoking is delicious for your health by Dr. Bersek and SOB. So my name is Michael Dr. Bersek Smith. I'm a senior manager of consulting at Red Leg. That absolutely has nothing to do with my enthusiasm for barbecuing. I'm a long-time barbecue enthusiast, I can speak, and mouse ears wear at various cons. Twitter, I can be followed at Dr. Bersek.
My name is Kyle Stone. My friends call me SOB. I'm a principal consultant at Red Leg. I too enjoy barbecue. If anyone has been out to my house, it's a yearly party, and we put lots of meat on the grill. I retweet credit card selfies on Twitter. That's kind of what I'm known for. People get a big kick out of it. Red team, go. Right? You can find me on Twitter at @SOB.
So, who wants to smoke some meat? Who barbecues at home? Who likes to eat barbecue in general? Should keep the mic in front of my mouth. All right, it's good to hear. So everybody loves, so there's a very unscientific poll that says everyone loves smoked meat, and the rest are vegetarians that don't love it. So very, very unscientific. So a little history of barbecuing. It starts out with curing food, which is the preservation of food and flavoring that reduces moisture content. This has been going back since the caveman ages. So people in their, cavemen in their caves or wherever stereotype dwellings that they lived, cooked meat over an open fire, were able to cook it, preserve it, and be able to enjoy it. Smoking of meat, slow cooks. So smoking has a couple of different characteristics. We have very slow cooking. Those of you that have grilled a steak, that's called fast cooking. So you're cooking it very fast, you're bringing it up to temperature very quickly, and it's only on the flames usually for around 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes at most.
Slow cooking, what slow cooking is designed to do, it's designed to tenderize the meat. Barbecue usually takes a lot of very tough cuts, things like briskets, ribs, etc. And by slow cooking them, ends up making them more tender. It breaks down all the fibers that are inside and makes them very tasty. Helps destroy the bacteria and helps seal the outer skin. Those of you that have seen that nice crusty stuff on top of barbecue, very tasty, that's what we all love, that's called bark. Bark. So today we're going to be talking about what's called Southern barbecue. This is what most of you are familiar with when you hear the terms barbecue. Southern barbecue kind of predates the colonial periods and pre-Civil War. So in the colonial period, you basically had semi-wild pigs. Came over with the Spanish explorers. What they would do down in the south is they release those pigs, let them go semi-feral, and then when they got hungry or they needed to get some food, they go and they hunt the pigs, and then they do a big, long cook. They used to be neighborhood parties, so you get it wasn't just you cooking in your backyard. You'd get everyone all around you, all your neighbors and friends, and you'd go have a big party and you'd have a pig roast. During the Civil War, it evolved a little bit, and you ended up getting well-fed hogs. So it went from having these semi-feral pigs to now having hogs that were kept on the farms. They were well-fed, they got fattened up on grain, and again, more fat, tastier. Still had the neighborhood parties. Now, what was interesting in this time period is that the rich people basically lived what was called high on the hog. Those of you who have heard the term, this is where it comes from. They ate the parts of the hog that were higher up, the tenderloins and the hams. On the other side, the poor folk and the slaves, well, they were given the tough cuts. They were given things like the ribs. They were given things like jowls. They were given things like the intestines, cracklings, things like that. So they had to develop systems and ways in order to cook those to actually make them edible. And that's where smoking meat and barbecue originated from. So post-Civil War, when the slaves who had been cooking this way, poor folks, sharecroppers who had been cooking this way, started migrating out of the South. And they started opening barbecue stands. They would sell barbecue on the weekends and while doing farm work or other things, sell it to their friends, etc. As time went by, those freed slaves and sharecroppers started heading north and west. So that's why we go from the south, where places like Memphis, North Carolina are known for their barbecue, up to places like Kansas City, which had a much more liberal, at the time, a much more liberal point of view when it came to slaves or ex-slaves, as well as items like that. Barbecue restaurants started to open up about the late 1800s, early 1900s, and nowadays we get to enjoy all those tasty barbecue restaurants. So this up here is about a list of about 13 states. Some will also include Arkansas, but I don't. It's about 13 states these are considered the barbecue belt. So these are the states that most influence barbecue. Most barbecue restaurants, regardless of where they are, have some kind of influence from here. And it's not only the main regions, but it's also it's not only the main regions, but also little minor regions as well. Places like Kentucky and places like Alabama, for example. Minor on barbecue. All right. Kentucky is the greatest state ever.
Ever.
There we go. So when we talk about Southern barbecue, we have four real main styles. First style is Carolina style. So who's from the Carolinas? Anyone here? Who's eaten barbecue in the Carolinas? All right, so one characteristic you might know of the Carolinas is most of the barbecue you're going to get there is generally pulled pork or sliced pork sandwiches. Pulled pork being one of the biggest ones. The sauces you'll have are definitely a vinegar-based sauce. Western North Carolina, you tend to go with the pork shoulder. And they use a vinegar sauce that has some tomato in it. So it'll be very vinegary, very, very thin, but have tomato sauce, usually ketchup in there, and some pepper. Eastern North Carolina, however, does the whole hog. So they'll take the entire pig, they'll slice it all up, they'll chop it all together, and then serve everything mixed together. Most people think that gives it a more sweeter flavor because it's mixing in the tenderloins and the hams along with the shank, with the ribs, with the shoulders, etc. Eastern Carolina also uses a thin vinegar sauce. So it's clear, it's crystal clear, it's got a little bit of pepper in there. You can actually make it very easily yourself. Take some vinegar, take some pepper, take some crushed red pepper flakes, shake it up, there you go, you got Eastern Carolina vinegar sauce. And they'll put that on their sandwiches that way. My favorite of that area is Central South Carolina. And they do pork shoulders generally, some do whole hog, but what they're known for is a mustard-based sauce called golden sauce.
My favorite, it's actually one of my favorite sauces, period, out there. I tend to prefer it. It gives, to me, the mustard gives the pork a nice bite to it.
It's very tasty. If you haven't tried it, I would highly suggest it. It's also better for people with sugar problems, blood sugar.
Yeah, if you're going paleo, that's the, actually North Carolina sauces are the ones to go with if you're going paleo. Very little sugar in them, very, very tasty.
Or keto.
Yeah. So then we go to Memphis. Who's had ribs in Memphis? Anyone? Good stuff. I love going to Memphis, one of my favorite cities for barbecue. So Memphis is known for wet and dry ribs and chopped pork. Wet ribs are basically ribs that are served with a sauce on them, been basted. Most of you are probably familiar with wet ribs outside of that area. That's what you usually get when you go to most restaurants. Dry ribs, however, are kind of the traditional, or the more unique thing to Memphis. So what happens with dry ribs is they get the rack of ribs out, they take a little bit of vinegar, they put it on there, then they take the rub and they put it on the rub and serve it that way. You can add sauce to it if you want to, but usually, it tastes great without the sauce there. Those of you who have ever been to the Rendezvous in Memphis, that's a good example of dry ribs. They're the ones that are usually recognized as the founders of dry ribs. And then chopped pork. So chopping up pork, they basically use pork on everything in Memphis. Pork stuff like sandwiches, but then some unique things. One of my favorite is that picture on the next to the ribs is spaghetti. So it's barbecue spaghetti that has pork. They use the spaghetti noodles, the pork on top, and they use barbecue sauce on there. Interstate Barbecue, fantastic place. Texas is all about the beef. Love Texas barbecue, Central Texas barbecue. Most of Texas, the barbecue styles, there's about 5 different distinct styles. 4 of them are very similar to the other areas. The unique one is Central Texas. Central Texas is places like Austin, Lubbock, Kreutz Market, Salt Lake, Rudy's, Franklin Barbecue, places like that. They serve them very meat market style. So generally, while there are places that will serve them as platters, what usually in Central Texas you'll come across is you order it by the pound. Take a quarter pound, they'll take a half pound, they'll take a full pound. If you're Parker, you'll take 4 pounds, and you'll enjoy it. They also serve sausage and brisket. Those tend to be the main attractions in Texas. The other big thing in Texas is they rarely ever use a sauce. It's there, you can use it, but Texas is not known for using sauces. It's generally eat the meat on its own. And to me, again, that's the way to go. Oops. And finally, Kansas City. Anyone eating barbecue in Kansas City? All right, a lot of good barbecue fans here. Kansas City, we have the sweet and spicy sauce. They cook most of the meats in there. Reason why is Kansas City was a very popular place for meat markets. So you had all kinds of meats going through there, cow, pork, chicken, lamb, etc. went through there, and they cooked everything. Burnt ends are one of the big things known for Kansas City. Those are the crusty bits. They're kind of burnt out on the end of brisket. They chopped them up. They used to chop them off and give them away to the customers, and then they realized, wow, these are really good. We can sell these, and now they sell for big, big bucks there. Sometimes bigger than some of the other ones. And then other regional styles, we have Alabama white sauce. Alabama white sauce. Anyone ever been to Big Bob Gibson's in Alabama? All right, so Big Bob Gibson basically does pulled chicken. And what they do at Gibson's, what the legend has it is, there was a customer who came in that didn't like tomatoes. So he asked Bob to whip up a sauce for him since he hated tomatoes. So Bob took mayonnaise and made a barbecue sauce out of the mayo. And it goes on the chicken, and if you're from Alabama, ask someone from Alabama and you just ask them about white barbecue sauce, their eyes will light up if they're a barbecue fan, and that's what they eat. That to them is barbecue. It's really good if you have it. I highly recommend it. Kentucky. So Kentucky has Western Kentucky, correct on the mutton? So Western Kentucky, a place called Black's is the one really famous for it, does mutton. So they'll cook and smoke mutton, and then they have a special sauce that goes on that. I haven't had the privilege of having that. Have you had some?
No.
No?
Never made it out there.
Have to make it out there someday, but I've heard very, very good things. Southern California. So Southern California, who's ever had tri-tip before? All right. So tri-tip is kind of a Southern Carolina, usually San Diego area. That's what really made it popular. They serve on what are called Santa Maria grills. And what a Santa Maria grill is basically it's a live fire that has cages around almost a grate, and you roll the grate up and down using a handle. That's a Santa Maria grill. So what they do is they cook the tri-tip, they smoke it over there for a few hours, usually about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then traditionally slice it up and it's served as a sandwich on garlic bread, but you can do it in multiple ways.
Fantastic. Really actually tastes fantastic the next day as well. One of the barbecue meats, I think, tastes just as good the next day as it does fresh off the grill. So I highly recommend that. Those of you who've been to Hawaii and been to a luau, so the tradition of putting the pig in the pit, putting the coals in the stomach, etc., steaming, cooking the pig that way, that's a form of barbecue as well. And then St. Louis is known for spare ribs. So most of you who go to the restaurants are probably used to baby back ribs, the smaller ones. Spare ribs are generally a little tougher, but they also tend to be bigger and they tend to have much more flavor to them. So those of you who had St. Louis ribs or spare ribs, that's what we're talking about here. All right. So when it comes down to smoking meat, we talk about choosing our weapon. Choosing our weapon is talking about picking our smoker. As you can see, there's a lot of smokers out there. So me personally, the one I like to cook with is that first one on the list, the silver box. That's DerbyCon. That's what we call a vertical smoker. I like to cook on that. That's a log burning smoker, and we'll get to that when we talk about fuels. But that's the one I like to cook at. It does a really good job, and those of you who had the ribs last night, that's what I cooked that on. So, thank you. Next to that is the orange grill with the bull horns. That's a pellet smoker. So pellet smokers are basically designed to be set it and forget it. Those of you that just want to get into smoking, just want to cook the meats and don't really want to do kind of set it and forget it, there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, pellet smokers are what you want to go with. Rectech's a very good company. There's a lot of good ones out there that you can use. And basically what you use is you use little wooden pellets. They were originally done for wood-burning stoves and pellet stoves. And you use them in the smoker, you close your lid, you set a controller, which we'll show you later on, and you set it to go, and 8 to 10 hours later, or whenever your thermometer goes off, your meat's ready to go, and you're done. Very easy to use. Who has a big green egg? Anyone?
Yep.
So the next one is a Kamado smoker. That's what a big green egg is. Kamado smokers are Asian in influence. Very easy to smoke with, and they use what's called direct indirect cooking. Direct indirect cooking. Basically, it's still directly over the flame. However, it's so far away that it smokes it. It doesn't cook it very quickly the way that doing it on a regular grill would do it. Bullet smokers, kind of the same concept. Usually, there's a water tray in there, but shaped like a bullet. Weber Smoky Mountain. Weber Smoky Mountain? Yeah. Weber Smoky Mountains are generally one of the most well-known bullet smokers.
Brinkman as well.
Brinkman's another good one, too. You want to talk about the drums?
The next one is known as an ugly drum smoker. Effectively, what happens is a bunch of rednecks got together and were rather low on funds and said, well, what do we have sitting around that we can make a smoker out of? And it very quickly drawed a lot of enthusiasm on the internet. And you can find several dozens of different plans to build smokers out of drums. The next one in particular is an offset box. So that's a rather long one. It's a pull behind. If anyone was at the party, there was one very similar to that, but it had a integrated firebox along with a PID controller maintaining the heat within it. What was very interesting about that one is it was multi-stage, so it actually had two planes with independent three. It was 3 planes.
Yep.
Yeah, 3 planes on it with independent levels, smoke controls, and thermostat controls.
It was not cheap.
No.
Our crazy boss got that one. Sorry, Lynn.
The next one is a traditional offset. That's the one that I normally cook on. So if you've been to parties at my house previously, you've seen OK Joe that I have that's very similar in design.
And those are actually usually nicknamed traditionally cheap offset smokers. And the reason why is that when they come, you buy them at the hardware store, you see them for like $150, $200. They'll do the job. The problem is that they're not sealed well. So to really make them do, like, you might make some decent barbecue from there. If you really want to turn it into stellar barbecue, you can actually go through there and you can go hack your barbecue, reseal it, add some modifications, and then turn what's cheap offset smoker into a really, really awesome smoker that didn't cost you all that much.
Right. The OK Joe that I use is about $400. The seals on it are abysmal. For about $15 to $20, you can buy proper food-grade silicone, fiberglass seals, and turn it into a really nice smoker.
And if you follow what we show you later on with the custom PID, you can actually add that to the to like something like a cheap offset smoker and give yourself further control over it, almost the same level of control that you'd have with the pellet smokers. So, right. So the next important thing when we're smoking meats is the wood. So many wood choices. Before we get to the wood, I want to talk about fuel. So wood is not necessarily fuel, it is, but it isn't. It's more about, wood is about the flavor for the most part. Fuel is generally charcoal, propane, and electric. Electric we're all familiar with. You plug it in, it gives you electricity. It's basically like an oven that gives you the ability to smoke chips as well. Propane, similar to like a propane grill at home, same concept. You just turn on the propane, gives you a very clean burning fuel. And then charcoal. Most of you are probably familiar with charcoal. Now, the interesting thing is charcoal's actually, basically charcoal, most of the irritants are out of the charcoal. So the way that the actual flavor gets into meat is when it's burned, it actually releases irritants into the air, and those irritants then get on the food, and that's what helps flavor it. Well, charcoal actually is free of a lot of those irritants. You'll get some flavor, but you're never going to get it the same that you would with just burning fresh wood. So that's why we use those mainly as fuel. So when you hear all the debates on lump charcoal, briquettes, etc., it's a preference thing.
Just so if anyone's unaware, charcoal is actually carbonized wood.
Yeah.
You burn wood and you put it out before it's finished combusting. Some of the briquettes that you will get are manufactured largely out of coconut husks. That's a auxiliary sales for them.
Yeah, there's competition smokers they'll basically go, when they're asked what do they use, it's essentially whatever was on sale or whatever the free charcoal that the competition is providing. They don't care. They know it's about other things besides the charcoal. So next time someone gets in that debate with you, you can just tell them there's way more important stuff than that. You're kind of worrying too much over nothing. So some of the other woods that we use, some of the primary woods that people smoke with, mesquite. So those of you who were at Derby last night, we were using mesquite. That was a big part of what we were using. Actually have one log left. Those of you outside of Texas and some of the other places in the South, this is mesquite wood. It's a pain to find up north, unfortunately. It's very expensive, which is sad because it's one of my favorite flavors when it comes to beef smoking. But
mine too. It's delicious on beef.
It's outstanding on beef. So what I traditionally use on beef myself is oak, because where I live in Chicago, it's really easy to find up there. So I get a lot of oak. It adds a good flavor to it. I like the mesquite a little bit better myself, but there's people that swear by oak, and that's the only thing they'll ever use.
The oak's a lot more mild, though, correct?
It can be heavy. It depends on which one you use. Yeah. I mean, well, yeah. I would definitely say it's more mild than mesquite. That's true.
Right.
And then hickory. So a lot of times hickory, especially with pork, is what you'll have a lot of restaurants do. Hickory gives it kind of a bacon flavor almost. Very, very tasty. Very good, very good tasting wood. One of my favorites, especially with pork. Now, all three of those generally tend to be mixed with other woods to really give it that punch. Generally, fruit woods. Before we get to the fruit woods, though, one other one that I recommend is maple. Maple is very much like hickory, so you get a lot of the same flavors, just not as strong. What's nice about the maple is, though, it almost gives it a little bit of a sweet undertaste to the meat when you cook with maple. So that's another favorite of mine with pork and with poultry as well, is to use maple and then do some fruit wood underneath it as a way to give it some enhanced flavor. So you can use all kinds of different fruit woods: peach wood, grapefruit wood, I guess. Anything that's hard wood. Pear wood's a good one.
Pear's another popular one.
Essentially, any wood that you want to use, you want to make sure it's not green, you want to make sure that it's dry wood, and you want to make sure it's hardwood. So you don't want to throw like evergreens into your smoke because it will ruin your food.
Or one of your guests may have an evergreen allergy.
Yes. You also don't want to kill Kyle. That would be bad. The two most commonly used, and that I tend to use, and I know Kyle uses, are apple and cherry. So Kyle usually uses apple. I'm a big cherry fan.
I love apple on pork. It's it's delicious.
It is. It's fantastic. I like the cherry a little bit better. It just gives it a sweet along with a little bit of a tart to it. And to me, the flavor is just gives a little bit more than what apple does. But again, it's all preference. You can't go wrong with either of them, in my opinion.
I don't like cherries.
You liked the cherry last night, though.
Yeah.
So this is a list on the slide, just some other woods that you utilize, what kind of food that they're used with.
Yeah, if you're interested in this, look it up. It's the Dutchman Supply Company's chart. It's published on the internet. They give the wood types, what the aromas are, what the suggested uses are, and what to expect with them.
And we'll post the slides somewhere so you guys can come back to them at some point. So barbecue accessories. So now we got our meat. I'm sorry. Now we got our smoker. Now we got our wood. Now we need some accessories to cook with. A lot of different things that you can cook with, some important stuff. For instance, rub. So when we season it, when we put our meat, this is what we use on it. We use rub. There's a lot of different ways to do it, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But this is coffee rub here for those who aren't familiar with it.
He really loves rubbing his meat.
I do love rubbing my meat. Thermometers. If I can tell you the most important thing outside of the wood and the smoker to have, and the meat, obviously, it's a thermometer. Reason why is anyone that tells you, oh, cook that brisket for 12 hours and it's done? No. You're going to have usually rock hard brisket that's bad. Every brisket's different. Every piece of meat is different. It's never going to be the same each time. So what you want to do is you want to get the temperature and pull it off only when it's at the proper temperature.
In some cases, you need dwell time. For instance, country ribs. So I'll smoke those for about 3 to 4 hours. I'll probe them, pan them, fill the pan with barbecue sauce, beer to thin it out, and then wait till they hit around 180, let them dwell there for about 3 hours, and by the time they come off the pan, they're falling apart.
Sure. And so thermometer important. This is an instant read thermometer. So this is the type of thermometer when you open it up, you stab it into the meat. This particular one is considered the quote-unquote Lamborghini of instant read thermometers. It's about $80, so it's not cheap. Thermopin by ThermoWorks.
Yep.
And gets a reading in about 2 seconds. Absolutely love it. I will never go back to not using one again.
They are very well respected on the internet. Look up any of the reviews on them. People absolutely love that brand.
Now, some of you are probably thinking, dear God, you're nuts for spending $80 on a thermometer. And you're right. So they also make one called a Thermopop. And Thermopops are about $20. Same great quality. They take a little longer to read, about 5 seconds. But if you're just getting into smoking, that's what I recommend. $20. You can buy them on Amazon. You buy them anywhere. Same company, ThermoWorks. Thermopop is the name of the individual thermometer. Fantastic. Then we have, these are remote thermometers. So these have probes on them. What you'll do with this is you'll put one of these on your grates. You also put one of these in your meat. This particular one takes up to 4, which is really nice. So if you're doing multiple pieces of meat, you can monitor multiple ones. What we were doing yesterday afternoon was we only have a limited number of probes, but as meat kept coming off, we'd plug it into the ones that were still cooking. So then that way, when one got up to temperature, I could go in, pull it off, go ahead and rest it and cool it for the event, and then essentially be able to plug that probe into the next piece of meat.
What's the street price on that?
This, I want to say it's about $80, and then it's an extra $20 for the other 2 probes. It comes with 2 probes.
The probes are considered consumables. They will eventually wear out. Mm-hmm. Generally, it's a good idea to have an extra one on hand, until they get the Amazon drones anyways.
That's a Maverick. Sobe here uses iGrill.
Yeah, I have an iGrill too. Absolutely love it. Again, that's another Bluetooth LE model. Batteries in those last forever and ever. I've literally had over 30 hours of cook time on 2 AA's. 40 hours, somewhere in there.
This is an infrared gun. Love this thing. Basically, this gives you surface temperature. I especially love this when I'm grilling steak, because when I'm trying to sear the meat, I can get a nice high pile there, get the nice flames, and just sear it. get the good temperature and tell me, oh, hey, that's 900 degrees. Cool. Now I can sear my steak and get a nice good seal on the meat after I'm done cooking it. So some other items of importance. Gloves. Always have gloves. Those of you that were around probably saw me burn my fingers multiple times, even with the gloves. But yeah, make sure you have gloves and make sure you have good ones, because you'll burn fingers and do other fun things.
Just for the record, I've never burned myself and I don't own gloves.
I find if you're klutzy, you'll do that. Thank you. Brush. Clean your grill.
Yeah.
Clean your grill, scrub it.
It doesn't add flavor. Stop lying. Just scrub it off.
The wood chunks. You can buy wood chunks in bags. You can buy whole logs. You can buy chips.
You buy half logs. You can buy ricks.
This is one a lot of people forget, baby wipes. These things are the greatest things ever. Use them for everything.
Not just for eating barbecue, but for cleaning it up.
Silicone brushes, so you can baste sauces on, baste olive oil on before you put down your rub, things like that. If you're doing pulled pork, these are called bear paws. Yes, I found it funny too. These are called bear paws. Lets you shred the pork. Works fantastic. These things are about $10 to $15 on Amazon. Best $10 to $15 I've ever spent for making pork.
If you've ever tried to shred 80 pounds of pork, you know what I'm talking about. Oh, yeah.
Yes, and thank you to Parker for spending all that time along with the other ones. I'm not sure if I've seen anyone else that was, but thank you, Parker, for spending all the time that you did cutting brisket and shredding pork yesterday. So, butcher paper. This is something relatively new I've just started using based on Aaron Franklin's suggestion. This is what he uses. In fact, the same color is what he uses in his shop. And I used to wrap, so when I pulled briskets, there's something called the Texas crutch. Brisket dries out very fast, and you can overcook it. It's the hardest meat usually to cook when it comes to smoking. And what you usually do is you cook it to about 160 degrees, you pull the brisket off, you wrap it, and then you put it back on and let it finish, and that helps keep the brisket moist on the inside. Well, the problem with doing that is you usually do it in tin foil or aluminum foil, and it softens the bark. So you lose a little bit of that hard, crusty bark. What they found out, sorry.
If you like the hard, crunchy bark, please follow his advice. Otherwise, if you like the soft, gelatinous bark, wrap in tin foil like I do.
So what this uses is, what a couple of pitmasters have figured out is that if you wrap it in the butcher paper, it lets it breathe more, and thus the bark still stays crunchy, as much as it possibly can if you wrap it. Also, from what I've heard, you can actually still get a little bit of smoke permeation into the meat using the butcher paper. Don't know if that's true or not, but that's just what I've heard.
It also goes for resting. If you're pulling it out to rest and you don't want the bark to soften while it's resting, use that.
Timers, just to keep track of how long your cooks have been going. Cooler. Cooler's an important one. When you pull your meat, so whenever I pull my meat out and I go to rest it, who's restaurant industry? Who knows what they can't? There's going to be a lot of that today. This talk is very full of those. Who knows what a camero is? The camero, CAMRO, who's worked in restaurants, catering, anything like that. It's basically an insulated box that you put food in to keep it warm. Well, they're not cheap, a couple $100 usually.
It's an insulated sham. It also depends on the size. So if you're going fairly small, they'll hold several steam table pans, right? Very large ones are industrial size. So think of the size of large refrigerators with doors. You slide the shams in and keep going.
So basically and this is especially becomes important when you're resting, once you rest the meat, when you pull it off, let the juices get back in there. Or let's say your cook finishes early, like what happened to us yesterday, where some of our meat was ready at 6:30 in the morning, and we had to pull it off and have it still warm for later on in the day. Well, what you do is you use a cooler, and you can create what they call a faux camera. And what you do is you put the meat in the cooler, you take towels, you put a towel down, you put the meat in the cooler, and then you stuff towels inside of it. As you put more meat in, you pull some of the towels out, and basically creates an insulated environment that still keeps the meat warm. Some of you that had the meat at about 4, that meat had literally been out of the smoker for about 12 hours and been sitting in that camera. It still was warm, still was enjoyable. And that's what's fantastic about it.
So around about 2 a.m. when we started sliding everything in the fridge and tearing stuff down, there was still warm meat coming out of them.
Mm-hmm. They work well. Other stuff are controllers, which I'll show you a little bit later. Knives. Get good knives. Makes your life so much easier. Good fillet knife, good slicing knife, things like that.
And sharpeners.
Yeah, sharpeners. Tongs and spatulas, be able to get the food off, brushes, and we talked about the other stuff. So meat in my belly. Different kinds of meats we have. Briskets, very favorite part of mine. Briskets, pulled pork, ribs, sausage, mutton, really any kind of meat you can get out there and smoke. Some work better than others, but those are some of the main ones. Again, the brisket, the pork, chicken, sausage, and brisket.
I've been doing a lot of pork chops lately too.
Yeah, pork chops are good.
It's an unconventional one, but it's a rather run short time, and they're pretty tasty.
If you ever go to a competition, they generally look around the pulled pork, the brisket, the ribs, the sausage, and chicken. So usually like a KCBS contest, Kansas City Barbecue Society. So those of you that were at the event yesterday, preparing the meat for destiny. This is the very high level of what I did to when we were cooking the meat. So essentially what I like to do is I like to dry brine my meats. Who here has, for Thanksgiving, has had the bucket full of salt water to dip the turkey in there and let it sit for weeks and weeks, or for days and days? All right, tell you right now, stop that, please. It's really dangerous, and here's the thing, you don't need to do it. What you can do is something called dry brining. Dry brining, what you do is you take salt, you put it on there, and it actually absorbs just as much liquid into the meat as if you wet brine it. There's a great website called AmazingRibs.com. The guy has actually done scientific testing on it with food scientists and shows you exactly how much moisture comes from each one and kind of proves that dry brining is the way to go.
And why should they not do it?
Food, disease, things like that.
Yeah, it actually increases your chances of foodborne disease.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the perfect environment for salmonella and various other nasty things you don't want.
I mean, the main problem is that you have to watch that. If you have a fridge at home and big enough to put it in there, okay, you can do it. But like me, I never have a fridge big enough. So when it came down to Thanksgiving, well, it's 30 degrees outside. Let's just put the bucket outside in the garage and let's just hope for the best. So, do a little sign of the cross, hope we can go from there and no one dies on Thanksgiving. So far, no one has, but trust me, there's a couple of family members I wish that wasn't true of, but hey. So dry brining the meat. So what we do is we usually sprinkle salt on there. I usually like to do, depending on the meat, brisket I'll do about three teaspoons, not tablespoons, teaspoons.
You will regret it if you use tablespoons.
Yes, you will. Put about half on one side, half on the other. Pork shoulder I'll do 2 teaspoons, 1 on each side, and the ribs I'll do about a half teaspoon on each side, so a total of 1. Really, and put it in there a few hours. You can let it go. If you can, let it go overnight because that really lets it soak in. This also works for steaks too. Pull your steaks out about an hour ahead of time. Dry, brine it, put it back in the fridge. When you come back to your steaks, you'll like to see a little moisture on the surface. That's how you know that moisture has been getting sucked in. It's all through osmosis. So what I actually start doing now is these are commercial rubs. These have salt in it. You have to watch out when you're doing this if you're using commercial rub because you don't want to oversalt your food.
Kind of question.
Oh, yes, sir. When I trim them down, I usually go to about I'm sorry. He asked how much fat do we usually keep on the meats. So when you get stuff like pork shoulder or you get stuff like brisket, it has a large fat cap on there. There's some people that keep it all on, they trim it off afterwards. To me, don't do that for one, because it doesn't let the salt permeate into the meat. More importantly, you cut off a good part of your crust, and that's some of the best parts of your food. Of your smoked meat. So I'll usually do about a 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. I prefer more closer to the 1/8 of an inch. It gives just enough protection to me, lets some render out and enjoy in the meat, but it doesn't leave too much on there for the guests that don't want a lot of fat on there. Same with pulled pork. I'll do the same thing, about a 1/4 of an inch where I can. A 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch where I can. Some will do more, but again, that's my personal preference. Whatever you do.
I tend to go a little thicker. I'm currently doing a keto diet, and I can eat pretty much all the meat and fat that I want, so I do.
I think of the other members in the household. That's where it comes out to. So
If they want it different, they can go cook it.
fair enough on that one too. I'll give you that one. So since we dry brine now, what I've started doing is, and now some people tell you just put rub on it from the start. And it'll absorb into the meat. That's not true.
No.
The only thing that absorbs into the meat is the salt. So if I put this coffee rub on here, the other flavors are not getting into the meat. They're staying on the surface. That's why we salt it first. So what I started doing with all my rubs, and I usually make my own rubs at home, what I usually do is I will do the salt. I won't put salt in my rubs. And right before they go on the grill, I'll put the rub on without the salt and put it on right away. Usually what I'll do is I will baste the meat with olive oil and makes it stick a little bit better. You can also use beef fat. Melted beef fat works fantastic too and really gives a good flavor.
For the brining or the rubbings?
For the rubbing, right before you put the rub on.
Yep.
So this is after the salt. So I will take it out of the fridge, have the meat sitting in front of me. I will take olive oil, I will baste the entire thing in olive oil, and then I will put my rub on top of it. You don't have to use a lot. You want to cover it, but if you want to use a lot, feel free to. It's your food, and it's especially, I only caution you to limit it when it has salt in it, just because you don't want to oversalt your food. A lot of food's been ruined by oversalting, and I've done it myself. It's very easy to do. Pork, I tend to like more of a spicier and sweeter rub on there, so I like to get a little sweet in there. I tend to use a little bit of brown sugar. I don't want it too sweet, but I like the pepper and the brown sugar. That's my personal choice. What about you?
Brown sugar.
Yeah. Now beef, I tend to like it more peppery. So what I used last night on the brisket, for those that had it, simply black pepper. It was about 3/4 black pepper to about 1/4 paprika. That's all it was on there. That's what I like to coat it with. Someone actually recently suggested to me adding horseradish powder to it, which is my next thing I'm going to try. Sounds fantastic, and I'm very curious to see how it ends up working out. So.
And I generally go with garlic and chicken.
I also recommended cutting holes and stuffing a clove of garlic in throughout the brisket, which sounds fantastic as well.
Yes,
So,
yes,
two new tricks for me to try going forward. Don't worry about room temperature. You'll hear the thing of, you have to bring your meat up to room temperature. It's not true.
He never lets his meat rest.
So when you pull it out of the fridge, no, you know what? Never mind. That was walking into something. Caught myself.
I went there.
Yeah. All right. So don't worry about letting your meat come up to room temperature. It's okay if it doesn't. And then you want to once you have your meat all ready and prepped, throw it in the smoker. Let it cook, measure your temperatures, and you're good to go. So now, you don't have money to buy a smoker. Let's build our own smoker.
So on this, we're looking at the Ugly Drum Smoker. We've got a URL provided here. It's got a prefabbed parts list and walks you through it. Our smoker we modified somewhat a little bit. We tried to go cheaper on that end, so that we could spend more money on industrial control automation. Effectively, the goals was to make a cheap and easy smoker, minimize the amount of tools that are required, and sustain even cooking temperatures through the use of PID automation.
Didn't want to weld, wanted to make sure the temperatures are even.
Yeah, I don't like Sawzalls. I don't like acetylene torches. I didn't want to get out a MIG welder. So building your own smoker, you can see the parts list here. This is for the basic smoker. So we spent about $15 on a clean drum. Check Craigslist. You'll find there is a plethora of drums out there. What you have to be careful for, though, is what is inside them and what has been inside them. Ideally, you don't want to buy one that has been used for oils or fuel. That will be a bad idea. Yes. Nor radioactive contaminants. You don't want those either.
When you say oils, do you mean industrial? I've seen like food oils. I've seen like
Industrial oil.
Yeah, food grade oils are okay. Industrial oils are bad. You still have to burn off the food grade oils so that you can paint them. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard problem getting the paint to stick.
If you use motor oil, you do it at your own risk.
Yes. Yeah. So, charcoal grates. For our smoker, we selected 2 grates. one approximately the size of the inner diameter and one slightly smaller, and you'll see later why that is.
Any hardware store, you can get a Weber grates for a 22.5-inch grill, exact same thing that you need.
Yep. The weldable expanded steel, why in particular you want the weldable is because you don't want it coated with anything nasty. You're going to be burning this and then eating the food that is rendered in the smoke. Miscellaneous bolts, nuts, handles, washers, so forth for the project was roughly $10. So just for the bare smoker, you're looking around $75, $80, and that's a pretty simple, ugly drum smoker, and it's exactly what it is. It's ugly. Yeah, cheaper than the thermometer. Yes, sir. Yeah, I was going to point that out earlier when he was going through the various smokers, is that quite a few of those are thousands of dollars. Quite a few of those are right around $1,000. Very few of them are sub 500.
Mine that I use, the log one's about 15. So that one's just
15.
That was the most 1,500. That was the most I've ever spent on a grill. It hurt to buy it, but damn, I love the food off of it.
So tools. What tools do you need to collect? Drills. You'll need a metal hole saw. You'll need drill bits that are capable of drilling through the barrel. The propane torch, which is optional but fun.
I had fun with that.
Yes, he did. And any other miscellaneous stuff you might need. So Sharpies for marking, tape measures, and so on. Most people have all of the rest of the tools readily available. So adding PID control to this. So when we spec this, again, we were trying to make this easy and affordable, and hopefully no one get injured while building this. So in particular, what we selected was a PID controller that dealt with 12 volt output. So it's low enough on the DC side that if you should accidentally touch something, you're not going to die. In addition, a 12 volt DC brushless blower. So basically the little squirrel blowers that you put in your PC, that's literally what it was. And a stainless steel PT100 3-prong thermistor. Those all wire directly to the DC controller. So Amazon prices right now floating right around $61 for that price set. That's the bare minimal that you need to retrofit an existing smoker or take a UDS and attach PID control to it. Here you can see a diagram of a simple ugly drum smoker. At the bottom of the drum, you have the air inlet on the outside. That's where we would attach the blower for the PID control. You have a fire grate, which you'll see later on how we built that. And again, that's also on the fix.com building instructions. This design in particular had a fire and heat diffuser. It's not really necessary. It does help to even out the temperatures. There are multiple designs for this as well. There are some people who put an additional grate there, stack it with fire bricks. There's some people who use thick steel as a deflector and then drill vent holes in it. The next layer up you can see are the removable cooking grates. Those are the grates he was speaking of that are available at most hardware stores. Most of the big boxes carry those. And then the top, obviously, is the lid that came with the barrel. So you want to look at that also when you're buying the barrel to make sure it's got like a snap ring lid. You will have to peel off the cushion foam seal that goes on the lid that it seals with, and you won't need to use the snap ring anymore.
And we didn't do it for this, but you can also, if you have an old Weber grill, 22.5 inches, again, same exact size, I could just go take my Weber grill, pop it on, done.
Literally fits right on top of it. And it's got the airflow adjustment, so you don't have to get out the drill to drill those. So, proceeding into the build of the smoker, first you need to burn the barrel. Propane torches are extremely fun. Please use caution with them. It takes a really long time for the barrel to cool off, as Mr. Barrel will tell you. Again, with the gloves. So after you're done burning it, you need to wipe it down, scrub it. You can use grill cleaner, wire brush, wet dry sandpaper, whatever you need to do to remove that last bit of ash. Now this is where I was saying that getting a clean barrel is important. So depending on what is inside of it, you are going to have a hell of a time getting this cleaned off. If there is rust inhibitor inside of the barrel, you are going to be sanding it, and it's going to take you a long time.
Luckily, we found barrels that didn't have anything inside of them.
Yes, we found barrels who had food service stuff in them and were stored in plastic liners. So you go find the ones that didn't have a leaky liner, and they're pristine clean on the inside.
Charge us a nice upcharge of an extra $5 for those.
$5, well worth it. So building your basket, here you can see the smaller grate with the expanded steel wrapped around it to form the chimney. So using the grate gets the chimney up off the bottom of the smoker and allows the PID or the DC brushless fan driven by the PID to control the amount of airflow that is being fed to the chimney so that the chimney burns appropriately, and you can easily adjust the heat dependent on the air. So next, you need to drill holes. You need egress holes at the top for the smoke to vacate the barrel. You need holes around the barrel appropriately so that you can put the inserts in and have something for the grill to rest on at the smoking level. Next, you need to paint your barrel, let that dry, and then add your PID controller to the bottom of the barrel. Again, see at the bottom there. After everything is dried, all your silicone is cured, everything is finished, you insert the basket at the bottom of the barrel, as seen in the diagram earlier. You light the charcoal, insert your top grills, turn the PID controller on, and you need to set the auto-tune mode. Any controller that you get nowadays has an auto-tune mode, so that you don't have to sit down with a slide rule and do advanced calculus to figure it out. What the auto-tune does is it allows the variable output from the controller to hone in on the temperature that you're aiming for. It also will self-continuously retune, so if environmental conditions change, it will then adapt to those. So if the sun comes out, if it gets cloudy, if someone opens a door, for instance, on internal control systems, they built that in so that you have a way to readjust. Typically, some of them will overshoot somewhat, but once they overshoot, they readjust, they remeasure themselves, the frame relines up, and then you're good to go again.
And one thing, when you light your grill, please be careful. I had a neighbor that almost burned his house down because he tried to use a leaf blower to get the flames going very fast and very hot. And sparks went flying everywhere and hit some stuff, and yeah, it ended up bad. His wife, I don't think, is still talking to him. So be very careful. If you're going to light it, use I tend to like using what's called a chimney starter. It's a big metal tube. Put some coals in there. You use either crumpled up newspaper or use a wax cube underneath. Light it. Gets it in there. You pour the charcoal in. It's good to go. Kyle likes to use his propane flamethrower, which...
Yes, I do.
Actually a lot more fun, truthfully, but... And just be careful.
And at the same time, that thing sounds like a jet turbine, and it will blow sparks just as well as the leaf blower will. So be very careful with those. Some charcoal, when you hit them with a propane torch, will pop and crack like popcorn. Watch yourself.
Yeah, and use common sense when you're smoking. Don't do it inside the house. I mean, I hope none of you are this stupid, but make sure carbon monoxide will kill you. Make sure you drag it away from the house. It's not too close there in case there's sparks or it heats up. Be careful where you put it. Be careful where you use it. Don't use it on like a wood deck or anything like that unless you have like a safety pad underneath it. Things like that. Just be careful. And
also to point out, as he said, to light with a charcoal chimney, That's effectively what you built in the bottom of this. Some additional UDS modification plans that I've seen include handles onto the grate so that you light it outside and then you pick it up and set it down inside of the drum.
One of the ones I have actually does that.
So there you're done. Cook some meat.
So you don't have to feed wood at the drum? You're not processing that wood.
So the basket is big enough on a UDS that it will run for 10 hours untouched. Ideally, the PID controller, if your temperatures are hitting and you don't have a lot of outside variables, you'll get about a 10-hour burn out of the plans that we showed.
One nice thing about the ugly drum smokers is they're meant to be sealed. So they
Yeah.
hold heat very well. They seal
Really,
very well.
really well.
That's why the cheap offset smokers, you actually do have to keep feeding because of the fact that they don't hold the seal very well. Better you're sealed, the better off, the more fuel you can put into. My particular one I use, you actually do have to keep feeding it, but that's just the style and design of it.
Yeah, he's got a log burner, so if anyone's never saw those, look one up. They're really interesting. The box actually sets external on top of the smoking chamber, and then it's got an exhaust fan that draws the smoke down and through it. Same as a PID, you set the temperature, and it tries to maintain the temperature by drawing it through, whereas the UDS PID controller design pushes the air end.
Real quick, just wanted to say some thank yous, and then we'll take some questions. So,
Robert, thank you. Chris, Austin, Pepper, Cam,
thank you.
my wife, and my kids.
Thank you.
Thank you for not killing me.
AmazingRibs.com, again, one of my go-to sites. Absolutely love it. Fantastic site. What's great about that site is they actually take a lot of the old barbecue myths and then they debunk them all actually using real science. So for this crowd, it would be very popular.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. There's a lot of food science behind a lot of the articles that he does.
And then thanks to Red Leg, who employs both of us, for giving us the time off, letting us work on this, etc. All right, thank you all very much. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So you have 2 racks, and the temperature is the same on both racks?
Temperature actually will traditionally be a little higher on the one closer to the fire. The PID will help even some of that out, but generally stuff will cook a little bit faster on the bottom rack.
I'm actually looking at expanding some of the PID control as well. The next iteration that I'm looking at is hooking the PT100s directly to a Raspberry Pi, and then using the Raspberry Pi to control various fans. But in that fashion, then we can cheaply, easily, and affordably, ideally, hook up Bluetooth LE food probes as well, pull the food probes, and then be able to integrate those into the PID calculations as well. They do sell commercial controllers that do that. You were talking well in the excess of $800–900 or up. Like I said, they're not cheap.
Yep. Any other questions?
What is the PID measurement? Just air temperature in the middle of the 2 racks? Or
So on this design, it was effectively, the question was what is the PID measuring? So effectively on this design, wherever you put the probe at, it's measuring the air temperature at that location.
where's that?
Upper grade. We had it at upper grade.
We had it at
I look
upper
at
grade.
food grade is where I put
Yeah.
my probes.
Yeah, generally any probes that you use to measure temperature, you want to get it as close to the grade as possible. You don't want to measure off the stack. You don't want to measure top barrel. And obviously bottom barrel's not going to do anything for
Those
you.
you have grills at home and you have those little like dial thermometers, yeah, those are crap.
They're terrible.
They can be 50 to 75 degrees off.
Yeah, and they're measuring at the top of the oven.
Hence why you want these kind of thermometers. Way better.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Sir.
For the pellet grills, can you get all the different kinds of woods that do they sell that in like pellet?
Most of them, yes.
Yes. And they're marketed specifically to the smoking industry, so you'll find that those are far more expensive than the standards that they use for heating. Yeah.
But, it's a trade-off. The ease of use trades off for, a little more expensive.
Generally, if you're going to order a rick of wood and you're actually running logs, you'll find that the markup between smoking woods and burning woods are not a lot. If you call around, especially off-season, and you find someone who has wood that they're trying to get rid of and it has been stored properly, you can usually get those for a pretty good price because they're not selling a whole lot of wood at the time.
I tend to use either kosher salt or I use sea salt. I like coarse flakes, not the chunks. You can usually find that in the store. So some sea salt, when I bought coarse flakes, it's really more chunky. So once you find a brand you like, stick with your brand because it'll just be easier on you.
A lot of people really like dry ingredients in the barbecue competitions as well, simply because you get more consistent results out of it. It's hard to repeat a recipe 10 times if you're using fresh ingredients every time, which kind of really sounds counterintuitive, but if you're going at the competition level, you need repeatability, and really the only way to get that is with preserved ingredients.
When you put it into the barrel, you just let it sit for 10 hours and rotate it.
So there's a couple different ways to do it. Most people will do it where they'll put fat cap up, let the rendering fat drip over the meat. Another way of doing it, and you sacrifice some of your bark, so this is the negative on it, is you can start it out fat cap down, and then about halfway through, you flip it you have a drip pan underneath, you flip it fat cap up, and you put it into the drip pan, and it soaks up some of the fat there, kind of does a additional basting thing. I don't think it's necessary, especially with...
Additionally, I've heard of people pulling that off, letting it cool somewhat, putting it back into injectors, and then re-injecting it back into the meat.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
I've not done that. It's honestly, to me, I've done it a couple times the second way I've told you. To me, it makes a small difference, but not enough that I'd rather have the crusty bark on there. So I usually do it fat cap up, let it go. I don't usually cover my pork, but some people will.
Anybody who's been to any of my previous parties, you've always had fat cap up. That's all I ever do, unless I do re-injection, which is a huge pain.
Yes, sir.
So that particular design, they recommend intermixing briquettes or lump with layers of wood.
Usually chunks in that one.
And then lighting it from one side to the other closest to the inlet so that it burns across. Some people swear that burning bottom up works better. Some people swear burning bottom down works better. I've not really seen any difference in them unless you have an extremely leaky smoker that you were trying to conserve fuel on. Ideally, you do all of your adjustment for temperature at the bottom grate. In this particular design that we were showing, that's all controlled by the PID. If nobody picked that up, so the output of the PID controller is variable. It's not a static on and off like a relay. It'll send pulses and then speed the pulses up and then slow them down based on the temperature difference that it's trying to achieve so that it's less likely to overshoot.
And so I think we're going to end questions there just because I think people want to go get dinner, and it looks like people have been working hard all day, definitely want to get out of here. So if you all have any other questions, please feel free to hit us up on Twitter.
Find us on Twitter.
Answer it any time. Or come find us later on. I'm always willing to talk about it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Everybody have a great con. Yeah, we're good. I killed those fucking germs.
Like, can I get a couple? Oh, wait, you drank them all.
I drank them all.
Bastard.
Those are actually really, really cheap. Thank God.